Welcome everybody to our Digital Services Forum call, the first one of 2023. Today what we're going to do is, last year when we finished up, we had a lot of people talking about financials. And that's what we want to start going into today, is some financials, and we're going to have some follow-ups afterwards. So I talked to a couple of people that couldn't present today, but down the road, if there is interest and this is a topic that we focus in on, then we can go ahead and bring some of those other sessions in and do follow-ups. And we really want to focus, we're moving to digital products in CSDM 5. We talked about that a couple times the last few meetings. So we'll talk a little bit about that alignment as we go forward. All right, if today's your first time being on with us, if you could just drop your name in the chat and where you're from, let me know that it is your first time so we can welcome you into the group. That'd be great. There's a link on the bottom here, and if you go to the Digital Services Forum, our community page, we now have one about, and I pinned this at the top of the forum so that everybody should see it. But it's one page where you can go ahead and you can register for the Zoom meetings. You can go in and get to the forum homepage. Goes right to our YouTube playlist. So these are the 4 most important links that you'll need in order to participate in the forum this year. I put it all in one spot. A lot of times it's all over the place, or people are sending me emails. This is actually, if you go to an email from me, it's in my signature block. You'll be able to click right at the bottom and get to this about page. So that link, I'll go ahead and share that too. I'll share that in the chat after I'm done presenting here. All right, so I always flash this up just to kind of remind everybody what we're here for. Our big goal is to be a leader in digital transformation and have everybody come to this group for that reason. And so our mission is to enable the members to be part of their digital transformation within their organizations. And then we share whatever we can. A lot of times it's presentations like it will be today. Other times we're giving you code or links to GitHub repos, or even on our shared instances, as you go back and get some of the information that we created for the meeting. So it is our enterprise architecture team, which I'm part of, and we have 4 of us, 4 other people on the committee besides myself, and we take on all of the content and anything like that. So if you do have any content that you want to bring up during these meetings, just like I'm responding to calls for content last year about financials, just send it my way, or some people in your area. So you have Jason and Rachel, and also we have we have Peter on here with us too. We do have our main way to get information out in this forum, as you probably all know, is we have these bi-weekly meetings. So this is our main avenue for sharing as much as we can. We do have some special events. We probably will have a knowledge session this year. So the knowledge session, last time we did a panel. I'm not sure what we're going to do this year, but we'll probably do something at knowledge as a group, as a forum. All right, so today what we're going to do, we're going to jump right into the material now, and we're going to go in and I'm going to introduce you to financials and ServiceNow, and talk a little bit about how it ties back to these models that we've been discussing for services. So this group is really focused on that core part of ServiceNow. We're not focused on any particular product on the platform, but the platform itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about that first. And once I set that kind of groundwork, Casey has a great use case that they did over at Orange County Sheriff that he'll be able to share with you guys to show you how some of those tables can be used, some of the base tables. And then we're going to go on and we're going to say, okay, if you really want to go like from the basic level, using some of the things as Casey did, all the way to the advanced level, our partners from Proven Optics will be here to talk about financial modeling and charging on that same core set of tables, which is great because everything builds off. It's kind of like asset management. You get ITSM, you get this asset management basic for hardware and software. But then if you want to go professional management and have auto reconciliation and all those things, then you would buy HAM or SAM, right? Software Asset Management Pro or Hardware Asset Management Pro. It's the same way with financials, right? You can do some basic things early on, but then if you want to go to advanced, there are options to go full on modeling and charging on the platform itself. And I think we have a couple other people in here that are doing financials. I want to leave a little block of time just to bring up your use cases so everybody can just hear them. So if you just have a sentence or two, I know if we have some people from UC Davis, I have about 10 or 12 people I know that are doing financials on the platform. All right, and then we'll save a little bit of time for content planning. Let me see if I can get this off. All right, Scott's here, so we can start now. All right, so if you look at financial wise, right, if you look at all of your endpoint devices, all your hardware on endpoints, all your software on endpoints, but also everything in the data center. So all of your UPS gear, your servers, your network gear, even stuff out in the cloud. If you take all that stuff together, these are all technology assets that you're purchasing in order to deliver value back to your organization. Generally, if you take all that stuff and add it together, you're going to come up with about 58% of your financial budget is going to be on these assets. And that 58% is what you're trying to squeeze the value out of, right? You're interested as an IT organization. Most of you on here are in IT. You're interested as an IT organization to go ahead and take that spend and deliver value. So a lot of times what we're trying to do with the platform, when you bring in a service management platform like ServiceNow, is we're trying to elevate that point of operation. We're trying to bubble it up to the services. And that's what we spend a lot of time on. We don't want to know how much that server costs. That's great, we have that cost. But the end goal is to say, how much does it cost to do support for our customers? Or how much does it cost to host that networking shared service? Or how much does it cost to onboard an employee? That's what we really want to look at. So if you come in and you look at this, you look at these different pieces, we'll go through a couple scenarios and just to talk through the types of charging and the types of ways that people are attaching to the models. And so a lot of times a lot of people know I deal with state government mostly. So in state governments, they have a shared IT area. And a lot of times the same way at colleges, they'll have an IT department, but other schools have an option whether they use that IT department or not. And so a lot of times what they do is they say, hey, well, we're going to offer app hosting. If you have a new app that you're bringing in, we'll be able to host it for you. And so let's say that Workday is the new app and finance comes in and says, hey, I want the IT department to help me host Workday. So they come in and there's usually a liaison to the department. It might be the HR department in this case. And that liaison will say, okay, we're gonna need some servers internally, or we're gonna need even anything from infrastructure support. Maybe even we just need single sign-on because there are no servers for Workday, right? Because it's cloud hosted. But we need something in our bucket over here that IT already has that they can use to enable Workday. So what they're able to do then is make sure that Workday is being hosted. And then there's usually a periodic charge, whether that's an internal charge or not. There's some type of charge for that work that IT is doing. So HR pays back some amount of money somewhere, or there's some agreement somewhere that there's a cost to host Workday because of the work that IT has to do, whether it's from a support perspective, or they're managing the contract, or they're plugging in some things over here to enable Workday to operate in their environment. Okay, and scenario 2 is similar, but this is all internal. It's all IT provided. So if you look at, we want a new shared service. So I have all these customers that are in all these different places outside of IT, right? When they're going to Amazon and they're all buying their own stuff. So what I want to do is I want to create a new cloud compute offering. I would pass from the shared services area. I would say, look, instead of us doing this over and over again, let's just create an offering. Let's wrap it up and put a nice bow around it so that we can offer these databases in our catalog. So here they would go to ServiceNow, they would do their planning. They might go out and they say, okay, now we have to have a contract with AWS so that we can offer SQL servers in the cloud, right? So now in our catalog, we push that back to the catalog, and now we have a new shared service that says get SQL Server. So anybody can use that shared service. And these buckets are what we've been talking about a lot, right? There's the external services, the employee services, those shared services these are more your technical services in CSDM language. And then the factory services, this is where all the build's happening, right? So this is the dev teams that would say, okay, what is your factory for ServiceNow if we have a new service there? Or what is your factory for Dynamics if you have a new service there? Or Workday if you have a new service there? So there might be several factories that have standard sets of build tools depending on the platform that you're using. Right? So if you look at all these things, right, you're charging here, a lot of times these customer services are things you're selling. So these are typically product charges to the external people. And a lot of times you're not selling them, right? But there's a lot of times when you're selling them, trying to provide the value and then getting a cost for that in. So when you talk about financials, the internal parts are usually service rates that you're trying to do cost recovery on a lot of times. So the the shared services, if we're charging for a virtual machine, we're trying to just recover what we spend on it so that we can provide that service back to the organization. So then you have the charging, and then at the same time you have how much does this cost? So in order to recover the costs of these shared services, for example, I'm pointing to this one because this is the one I know a lot of us do, is you have a VM and you have a rate card for a VM, you have a rate card for a service. So what you're trying to do is cost recovery for the entire IT department. So in this case, you would try to break even in these two areas. Okay, so that's really what we're looking at today, is how do we get back up? How do we get those costs back up from those underlying servers? How do we get it back up and tie it into the services? Okay, so we know that the common service data model supports a lot of that, and these lines in here can be used for that, right? These relationships, that's really what they're for, is so I can say that application uses all these servers and all this network gear. So you can start tying things together, and if I know how much the network gear costs, and I know that server that uses, or that application uses one of the 24 ports on that network gear, I can do a model that would tell me how much that application costs to run from a asset perspective. So that's what we're trying to do today, right? Is look at that concept. At the same time here, we're going to talk a little bit. I think a couple people are doing chargebacks for labor. So when you do have a service that's operating, besides that 58% where I said it's on hardware, software, cloud services, there's the other part of it where it's okay that most of that remaining 42% of your technology spend goes towards people. And when you think about what those people are doing, they're managing ideas, they're managing demands, right? So if we also take all of that work and we tie that work to those services, now we have almost all of our technology budget that we can allocate to services. And it's the same way here. We've been talking a lot about how do we tie all this work and make sure everything is done on behalf of a service or a set of services, right? And that's really what we're after. So that's all of the things that we're doing. Everybody's thinking about it for change impact assessment, for incidents, but there's also a lot of the foundational work we're doing can apply to these financial settings as well. All right, plan, build, run. So right, there's all these different areas. You're planning all the pre-work that goes into building services. When you're running, this is a lot of ones. If we're mapping incidents to services, we can set a cost on that. And then we're building the same thing. These build teams, usually you're charging back here per hour. So I see a lot of this already where there's hourly charges going back in a couple of the organizations I work with. So some of you may not know this, but you have a set of financial tables in your ServiceNow instance, or you have entitlements to tables. So I won't say they're there all the time. But the core set of tables that you have that you can use for these types of configuration are rate cards, right? So there's a rate card table in there, and that rate card table is extended by labor rate cards. So I'm charging $80 an hour for a Java developer, or I could have all that listed, all those labor rate cards. And then when somebody submits a time card, I can say, okay, apply that rate based on the time they took, and then bill it back to this project or this project task that maps to that service, right? So that labor rate card can walk all the way back up to that service. And it's the same with a task rate card. If you say, okay, we're doing 10,000 incidents a month, and I'm going to run that team that's doing that incident management, it costs X amount. So I'm going to charge you $5 an incident, right? So the incident is mapped to that service, so I can walk that dollar all the way back up to that service. And the CI rate card is, I could say that I'm hosting this app for this person, that on that app, I'm charging them for all the underlying infrastructure. Oh, they needed a new server last month, so they went from 10 servers to 11 servers. So now what it would do, the CI rate card could pick up, and when it runs the contract, it can say, hey, there's 11 servers now, so instead of charging them, for the 10 servers, up that charge. So the CI rate card is more of a dynamic discovery of what that bill rate should be for the entire app hosting piece. Okay, there's a couple other ones in here for the, all these labor rate cards, they'll map back to expense lines. So they actually create an expense for you when labor is done. That's the idea. Or when a new CI is added, or when a contract rate card fires, to say, go count the CIs. And so these are all tables that you should have already. This is an expanded version of that. And this will actually take you into some of the external tables that map into the financial tables. And like I said, this is the deck you'll have in the end, but this is a little bit of an old representation, but you can start tying these financial things to assets, to time, even to contracts. Like if I have a contract rate card for a service I'm delivering, I can execute on that contract and create expense lines that I can then charge back to somebody's cost center. Okay, now some people use these tables. There's quite a few of you actually on the call that use these tables already. And one of them is here with us today. And I'm going to hand it over to Kyle. And Kyle's going to talk a little bit about how we use some of these tables to execute on one of their use cases over to Orange County Sheriff. So Kyle, I think you could just take share away from me. And if there's any questions, you can go ahead and drop in chat, or just come off mute, either way. They're a pretty small group.
I think you mean Casey.
Well, yeah, was I going first or Kyle?
Oh, Casey, sorry. Yeah, Casey,
no worries.
Okay. Thanks for having us, John. Just to give you guys a little bit of a background here at the Sheriff's in our technology division, we're kind of split 50-50. And we do a lot of IT side, and we also have radio. We do radio repairs. We keep the radio network up and running for the entire county of Orange. The radio side, we had a use case where we actually bill for services. If, say Anaheim PD's radio is broken, they bring it to us, we would repair that radio, and then every month we send Anaheim a bill for all of their repairs. And that's where the need came for us to start tracking some of these billings and those types of items. So we accomplish this mainly using the field service module. So we have work orders, the work orders are assigned out, and then we tie all of our labor, we have parts used, and we have incidentals based on what they're doing into that. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my instance here to kind of just show you guys briefly what kind of a standard work order would look like. Let me know if you can see my ServiceNow instance.
Looks good.
So this is just one I just happened to pull up here, and it's just a basic work order. For this one is the Orange Police Department. And on each work order, you'll have tasks. And this one in particular, it looks like it only has time worked on it. So no parts were used, no incidentals, but every work order that we work on would have different, needs based on what it is they're doing. And my team created flows that run at the end of the month, and they'll add up all of these expense lines, as you were saying, in these categories. And that's how we build our invoicing. So jumping a little bit further here, this is a standard invoice that we send out to one of our customers. So this would be Orange PD's invoice. This is on our test server, so it's not real data, but for instance, in this case, every invoice is going to have 2 monthly expense lines, and each of those monthly expense lines adds up the expense lines from every work order. And the way the County of Orange does it is everything is broken into either parts or labor. So those were our 2 buckets we had to work with. And obviously labor includes just time worked and the cost for it. Parts would include both incidentals and any parts that we'd use. And we used both UI actions and flow actions to generate our PDFs on the fly based on the invoice. So in this case, this is one of our summary reports that we send out to the agencies. That's all the data is pulled via ServiceNow linked, and we generate it and we send it out to them, and it shows them all of the work orders we worked on, what parts were used, how much labor, et cetera, et cetera. So this gives the agency a good overview of everything that they're being charged for in a particular month. Just like the summary, we have the actual invoice, which is sent out to their financial. So in this case, Orange Police Department, and this is the actual form that would get sent back to our accounting department and then processed and then, paid for that month's labor and reports. So the nice part about all of this is, since it's contained within these expense lines and other items within ServiceNow, it's all can be linked, it can be displayed. You can see every work order that is tied back to this invoice. So we get a nice overview of everything. And then once you actually go down to your monthly invoices, you can see, for instance, this one is our labor invoice. You can see all of the labor expense lines that are tied back to it as well. So every job, what the rate is, and these go back to the labor rate cards, the work orders. It actually paints a very nice picture of how everything ties together through these tables that they have, plus 1 or 2 custom tables that we have for, we'll say, county specific guidelines that we have to follow. But it lets you trail all the way from the invoice down to the work order itself where it's on and see what the tech did. And then when we're building these reports like the summary, we can pull that data directly into the summary to be used. Same thing with our parts. These are all the parts that were used. You can see what part it was. If we look at the actual expense line, it'll tie back to the part. It ties back to the cost, the work order. So that's kind of a very brief overview of how we kind of look at everything, and then we generate these invoices. Now, our flow that we have actually will go through, and because we created flow actions and we're using the generate PDF API, it'll create all of these PDFs for us. And then we can also, we're not yet, but our plan is to eventually automate sending these out and eventually getting it to where Orange PD has a credential to our system and they can log in and see in real time what's being done, what work orders are pending, what invoices are pending. That piece is still on our roadmap and isn't completed yet, but for right now, we're doing good. We're generating the invoices, we're sending them out, and at least our internal staff can view it. And when Orange PD calls, we can get them what they need, get them the info they need, and get them kind of paid and distributed out. That's kind of a rough overview of how we kind of do anything. Was there anything in specific you wanted me to go a little more into, John?
So underneath you used a couple custom tables, is that right?
Yes.
So I know you used the flow and the PDF generator. What other kind of underlying nuts and bolts did you use? Custom tables?
Yeah, that's really it. We have a custom table. For instance, this one is our billing invoices table that we created. And that's just because we wanted to keep these invoices in a separate location that's just for them. And then we gave only our financial staff access to that table to keep it segregated. So that was a custom table. But other than that, we just use the out of the box flow actions and the generate PDF API so that we can generate them. The one thing that I will say was tricky was everything for our financial had to be this exact look. So replicating this exact PDF every time via HTML turned out to be trickier than we had thought. So we wound up using a form fillable PDF, and then the generate PDF API has the capability to just pick and choose fields from the form, and you can fill it into fields on the form fillable PDF. So that actually worked out really nicely for us because we can keep the look exactly how it is on every invoice that we generate.
Awesome. Yeah, it looks really nice.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah,
when you send these out, then how many of these you send out? You send them out monthly, or?
we send them out monthly. There's about, I want to say 80 agencies that we have that we do radio billing with, but not all of them get repairs every month. So somewhere between 40 and 60 we send out a month. Excellent.
Yeah, it looks nice, man. I remember working with you in the beginning on this. It's come a long way. So
yeah, it was you know, a lot of changing directions as we went, as we found things better and having to, go back and redo stuff. But we're pretty happy with the way it ended up now, where it's working pretty solid. Okay.
And then the only core table you used out of the tables I showed was just the expense line table, right? And you use cost center too.
We use cost center, we use department, we use labor rate cards, and we use the expense line table.
Okay, so quite a few tables in those base tables. So what's nice is you don't have to pay for those, right? They don't take off your custom table count, but so the only one you used off your custom table count was the invoice table.
That's correct, yeah. And we've talked about using the CI for our parts. Right now, we're just using the cost on the part itself, but we haven't made a decision on that one yet.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Yeah, I know another county, Riverside, had something close on this when we talked to Philip a while ago. It was basically the same thing. I think it was chargeback for field service tickets, but I don't think it was radios. I think it was more of, people doing work.
Yeah, we got a lot of our ideas from that chat with them. It was very good, but then we kind of had our own things we had to satisfy and then kind of went our own direction on a couple. Yep. And I think we found a good happy median there.
Yeah, it's great that you guys were able to meet on the group, and you probably even share back to them if it comes around again on their side. So perfect.
Yeah.
All right. And thanks so much, Keith. This is really good.
Thanks, John.
So that's a good example of how you can use some of those base tables that you have today that's included with ITSM. And if you do any questions for Casey, just drop in the chat there if you think of anything afterwards. We'll hand it over to now Kyle and Ed. They're going to talk to us a little bit about how we really go the full length. Now, so these, I'll just do a little intro. So Proven Optics, we used to have, if you look, and a couple of people asked me about this, hey, you had ITFM, and I was just talking to one of the cities in Southern California, and they're like, well, we want to do chargebacks now, and we used to have financial charging, and it's still in our documentation. If you can go, you still see modeling and charging. All of that product now is owned by Proven Optics. So they're like an extension of our company for doing ITFM, IT financial management. And that's why I asked them to come in today. And it's almost like you were doing it before, but we didn't have the financial experts we needed for those products. So we said, okay, we're going to work with a partner, and Proven Optics is our partner to take all those base tables and really go the extra mile with them. So Ed, you can take it from there, but looking forward to it.
Yeah, John, thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to speak today. Kyle, you can go to the agenda slide. But by way of introduction, my name is Ed Hand. I lead sales and marketing for Proven Optics. And John, thanks for the introduction. But just a quick high-level overview. Proven Optics is an IT financial management solution natively built on the platform, and we stress natively built. So we leverage the whole platform that Kyle will take us through. We focus primarily in a couple of key areas to do IT budget management, IT cost modeling, invoicing, including both chargeback and showback. So we'll talk a little bit about Proven Optics, but really we want to get into the use cases and product and the applications, and then field any questions but we always know seeing is believing, so we'll save most of the presentation for the demonstration. Kyle, why don't you give a quick introduction, and then we'll go to the next slide.
Yeah, and nice to meet everybody on the forum today. My name is Kyle Holetz, and I lead the solution consulting team here at Proven Optics.
Thanks, Kyle. So real quick, as you can see in the middle, we serve both the private sector and public sector, federal, state, local, and high enterprise clients across the board. One of the things that you'll find that gives us a unique differentiator is not only that we're built on ServiceNow, but we have deep practitioner expertise in IT financial management. So bridging the conversations with both IT and finance, and then delivering that back to your internal clients who's consuming the services. One of the highlights, and I'll turn over to Kyle to talk about the products that we're extremely excited about. It got breaking news yesterday, a press release that ServiceNow Ventures has made a significant growth investment in Proven Optics. So we're thrilled about that. Not only does it strengthen our go-to-market, but also our product synergies. So John, thank you, and ServiceNow, thank you. But excited about that, and you'll see more developments as we iterate and elaborate on our product portfolio this year. With that, I'll turn it over to Kyle to take us through a high level of the key applications, how we leverage the platform, and then actually demonstrate the solution itself.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. So a couple slides here just to cover kind of how we're natively built on the platform. As this is more of a technical audience, many of you will probably understand this, and it'll be easily resonate. So when we think about how Proven Optics lives on the platform, right, it's a scoped application that's installed directly from the store, leveraging all the same platform capabilities that people are using today, right? Whether it be the security and compliance, the integration mechanisms, right? And of course, the reporting and analytic engine. As a big benefit of that, right, what that means to clients is, of course, that existing infrastructure that understands ServiceNow today, as well as the resources, right, will have an immediate familiarity with any Proven Optics application, just of course in the scope of that IT finance world. Really, we like to show this slide now because it shows kind of how we interact with particular vertical groups within ServiceNow. As we know, that's divided up into 4 main groups, right? Now, most of our applications tie directly into areas like SPM, the SPM suite, APM, and we leverage a lot of CMDB data as we think about building out the IT financial management cost model for those business critical apps or potentially the entire technology stack, depending on, of course, the customer outcomes that they're looking for within the Proven Optics application. I'll talk a little bit about how our applications tie to specific applications specific ServiceNow applications on the next slide. But I'll pause for a second. Ed, I don't know if you have any color to talk through these last 2 before we move on to the last one.
No, I'm great, Kyle. Thanks.
Cool. So moving on to the product slide, our 3 really bread and butter products are cost modeling, budget forecast, and then of course, for the purposes of today, invoice and chargeback. We also recently came out with a cloud financials application. The point of that one, and we should be releasing that onto the store here shortly, is really to take cloud bills, parse them, tag assets in an automated fashion from within that bill, and then drive financials against those cloud assets that we're tracking within ServiceNow, right? Whether that be in Cloud Insights or potentially even within a particular CMDB CI record. The cost modeling application, right? This is really providing that service and unit-based costing for every object within the IT stack, right? So we're taking that true raw data from a financial layer in the GL or an ERP system, and then rolling it up through a cost model. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in the demo. Through direct financial mappings, as well as a lot of allocation and consumption files. So some of the things that John talked about earlier, right, how we can leverage those core tables within the cost modeling application and all Proven Optics apps. What we always like to say is look, we look, feel, and act just like ServiceNow. The more data you have within ServiceNow, the more accurate and automated our model can ultimately be, as it can act as the source of truth for what we're driving within our cost model from a cost object standpoint. The budget and forecast application is really that full life cycle budget and forecast management, right? So as you might assume, this ties extremely well into the demand management process within SPM as we think about strategies, or potentially PPM as we take on projects or initiate a budget request that gets approved, and then we tie that budget request directly to that project. Additionally, within this application, we also bring in actual expenses against that budget request. So you get a variance, right? So dependent on what was funded within that budget request, we know at all times where we stand from a funding standpoint in areas we might be burning too fast or burning too slow against particular, approved budget requests that have projects being executed against them. Lastly, we have the invoice and chargeback application. The invoice and chargeback application actually leverages the cost model, because the cost model is how we generate a rate, right? So and even John alluded to this as well. A service is generally made up of a number of things, right? It could be a server, it could be an application, there could be labor associated to something like a laptop provisioning activity. So we use the cost model to get that total cost of ownership of a service, and then we rate those services within the invoice and chargeback application for things like invoicing back to a customer, a business unit, or even showback, right? If we're just trying to establish rates, make sure that they're digestible to the rest of the business, many of our clients there will start with more of a showback methodology and then move into a chargeback. So with that, that's about everything I had for the product slides. Ed, I don't know if, went too far here. If you had any other ads you'd like to make here before we jump into a really high level demo.
Just really, we focus a lot on the data and the data integrity. As you're providing invoicing and chargeback and showback to your clients, the accuracy of that data is incredibly important. Again, to drive Kyle's point home, we'll leverage a lot of that out of the CMDB and the existing system. So we focus a lot on the data validity and data accuracy that we automate through the solutions here. So a key piece that in best practice we don't want to overlook.
Absolutely. So we'll jump right into the app, and I'm going to go through both the cost modeling application, the invoicing application, try and spend about 5 minutes on each and keep within the timetable here. So what you're seeing on my screen now is the service portal for our IT financial management cost modeling application, right? Standard personas within this is, of course, that ITFM team. You also have the persona of a data owner, someone who understands how many units of something we own, right? Licenses against an application, and how a server might support a particular application or a business service. And then, of course, the last persona is that leadership persona, right? So as we are executing our model in the workbench, we're allocating those expenses throughout the model, right? Running that whole job generally when we're closing our books at the end of the month. We're populating reports and dashboards that CIO, CFO, and other leadership across the organization leverages that decision support matrix. So as you see here, we have the standard portal set up. All of our products come out of the box with the portal. An ITFM analyst, might have a specific role within this where we're just tracking, importing data and working within the workbench when we're closing out our books at the end of the month. The data owner persona, there's also workflows embedded in here to drive that request process, because those allocation and consumption files drive the relationships within our model to give us that total cost of ownership of an application or of a service, so we can drive that request process right from here, so we can move away from things like emails and phone calls and track the progress from that single pane of glass. I'm going to jump right into the cost model setup and view an example cost model here. So standard structure of our cost model, right, is these 11 segments. Now, many of our customers, and one of the things we like to drive is it's very, very flexible, right? Some of our customers might be using 4 of these segments, some might be using 10. It really depends on the outcomes that you're looking for, right? If the goal is infrastructure TCO, we get to that level within, the segment hierarchy. The goal is app TCO, we want to make sure we're getting up to that level. When we think about the structure of the model, there's a couple rules that we always try and follow. Those are that dollars always move up, and dollars can, of course, skip segments. So in the case that we have a delivery project, for example, for something like ServiceNow Field Service Management, that is being executed, it's going on. We're tracking those project dollars from, ServiceNow PPM potentially, or even externally to the platform. We're basically agnostic where the data comes from. But, if we have it in ServiceNow, that's great. We can cut manual effort, cut some integration points that other point solutions in this space rely on. But those dollars, for example, would skip from the project segment all the way up to the business application that's being deployed. When we think about who uses these particular segments, the bottom two segments here are really that financial layer. So if you imagine that GL or that financial system sitting here below cost subpool, we're mapping up expenses through direct relationships of data that lives within that financial extract into these first two segments, and then using the allocation and consumption files from the data owners to populate the rest, right? So driving things like a relationship between a server, a technology device, to what it supports from a business application or business service standpoint. When we think about where this data comes from, right, which represents all of the numbers here on the right, many of you will probably look at this and say, this might live within ServiceNow today, or we have goals to get this into ServiceNow today. That's our goal as well, right? So a lot of this information can come directly from the CMDB, from a business application table, from PPM, and the more data we have within ServiceNow, of course, the better. But many times we're bringing that information in externally. So I wanted to give a little respect to kind of how the model is structured, how we're driving those financial mappings of kind of teaching the model what to do with the information that we're driving into it. And now we'll jump over into some quick reporting and analytics. So these tabs across the top here pertain to different personas generally, or outcomes in the organization, right? So the overview tab is really meant to be that CIO, CFO dashboard that's a culmination of important reports from the preceding tabs. Business service owner, business application owner, potentially a director of infrastructure, right? These are all segmented out with sort of those categories. Within the overview tab here, you'll see a couple important things that I want to point out. This is where we're really adding that financial basis to metadata that we're tracking within ServiceNow. So you'll see some references here in the report, like IT spend by strategy, right? So we can, of course, drive these dashboards based on, particular fiscal periods. In this case, we're kind of looking at it in a year-to-date example or a lifetime example. But in this case, strategy would be something that we could potentially be tracking in ServiceNow. And being that we have applications, servers, CIs, and a number of things linked to those strategies that we're giving that financial basis to, we can then tell you based on a particular point in time or fiscal period, how much have you actually spent driving that strategy? Many customers see this, and when they run their first cost model, they find that 80% of their spend is not going towards specific business strategies that they're moving towards, whether it be getting off on-premise technologies, or replatforming, or supporting the remote workforce, as you would see here. Additionally, we can see who is the top line of business in terms of IT spend. The goal of this report is to really help us understand, how does business consumption affect IT spend, right? So as the marketing department in this case looks like the lion's share of those costs, we can drill down under the hood and see exactly where those costs are coming from a grouping standpoint. And in this case, drill down a step further into something like applications and see what that breakdown looks like in terms of all of the applications that the marketing team uses and how much they're costing us from a total cost of ownership standpoint. Also, you'll see a sampling of other trending-based reports, as well as, again, using that metadata, something like application portfolio, to show us how much we're spending based on a particular portfolio, and again, where we might have like applications that we have the opportunity to rationalize or replatform. Now, for the purposes of today, I want to focus a little heavier on the services tab here. So as we talked about within the cost model, the goal here is to drive that service total cost of ownership. Many of our customers, when we start out in these conversations, we talk about, how do you rate your services? How do you come up with the rates that you're charging back to the organization? The cost model gives us the mechanism to show exactly what providing that service costs, based on the relationships and the direct mappings that we're driving up through that cost model. So in this case, we can understand, what does our laptop provisioning service cost us, right? This is not only a combination, it's not just looking at hardware, right? It's labor time, the support for, getting that on the network. There's a lot of different things that can potentially be related to providing that service back to the business. We can see how those services trend over time, who the top customers of services are. And then an important one that I like to call out is the service capacity and utilization. What this gives us an idea of is when we're right-sizing our service offerings, and the laptop example is a good one in that we generally know how many laptops we own. We know how many laptops we have allocated out or somebody is using, right? Based on that average unit cost that's being provided against that particular service from the cost model, we can see based on the delta between the capacity and allocated units, what that cost of idle capacity is. So at the end of the year, quarterly, when we're reviewing our service offerings and right-sizing them, we have good data to know where we have opportunity to cut spend. Lastly, the applications tab, this one will be quick. It's all about application TCO, right? So as we drill down into something like SAP, and in this case, it's costing us the most, we can then understand what are the cost drivers under the hood of SAP, licensing, right? Any internal support and operations dollars, servers that are supporting the application. And a step further will, of course, take us down to that raw data, right? So we can see over our different fiscal periods, what we're charging out, project dollars, server dollars, right? Any of those objects within the model that have a relationship with SAP. All right, I'll pause and see if there's any questions on this coming into the chat, or Ed, if you have any items you'd like to add.
Nothing to add, Kyle. I think we have probably about 5 or 6 more minutes to turn it back over to John.
Yep, I'll rip through invoicing here real quick and use my best auctioneer voice. So similar to cost modeling. Oh, go ahead, John.
Does labor come in there somewhere too?
It does. So when we think about where that financial extract for those operational dollars coming in from the GL, labor, contract, external, internal labor, right, outside services, that's all data that lives within that. And so we're mapping that up into cost pools and sub towers. And then based on some allocation, we're driving that then to an app by whatever that consumption metric may be. Could be a percentage of that time going to an app or out direct hours, right? A couple different ways to do that, but yes, it does.
Okay.
So here we have the invoicing portal. I'll speed through this as well. So now that we have the cost model structure kind of overview, right? From that, we understand what our services cost us to deliver. The invoicing app then takes that information and allows us to provide service rates against it. So in this case, we have all of our different rated services. And effectively what this is any object within the cost model can have a rated service applied against it. So as we're bringing in that data and seeing that actual information pushed in on a monthly basis from the cost model, we can then apply a service rate to any of those costed objects, right? A costed object within the model could be a business application, it could be a service, it could be storage or server utilization, right? Or even hours from an enterprise architecture time. So the rates are applied based on that data and objects within the cost model. And then we're pushing those out to customers, right? So the customers that are, of course, digesting those services, we'll continue with the marketing example here. We'll get that PDF printout. There's, of course, a workflow in the back end where an invoice comes in and draft, it's reviewed, and then, of course, it's finally approved. But customers generally have the opportunity to come in, hold particular disputable charges and things like that. And then what that allows us to do is not hold up the entire billing process, but hold individual line items and continue on billing and potentially roll these into the next month billing once we get that, that particular line item figured out. From a reporting and analytics standpoint, in a very similar fashion, we really have 2 main report groupings for the invoicing product. Of course, one is a customer view and an administrator view. In the administrator view, this is really tracking where we're standing from our billing process, right? What dollar figure do we have sitting in a particular pending review state based on department? Where do we stand based on our billing process, again, for a particular fiscal month? And again, some high level data around, are we trying to be kind of net neutral in terms of our recovery, or are we a revenue producing arm in the case that we want to show that back to the rest of the business? Also scrolling down, you can see what that total recovered spend is against your total cost that's coming in from that cost model information. And very similarly, when we think about that average unit cost based on all of those different services and cost objects that we have, we know how much it costs us from the model, where we're justifying our rate from, and then we can see our service rate that we're charging back to the business. So again, this allows us to review this in real time or based on a committee and potentially right-size these rates in areas that you see like on the top here, where we might be undercharging the business for what we're putting into a particular service. When we think about customer self-service analytics, that's really the customer tab here. So many times this will be driven directly from the portal. So if I'm a marketing lead or someone within HR who's ultimately approving and paying these invoices out from my budget, right? This is an example of what that customer self-service view might look like. So in this case, they would tie into the dashboard here directly from the portal or the backend as you see here, and get an idea of where all their invoices are sitting, right, across different fiscal periods, and where they're spending the most in terms of IT dollars. So with that, that's about everything that I had planned. I think I'm actually on time for once, so I will flip back over to the slide deck really quick, and we can go from there. Ed, any last thoughts?
Just again, want to say thank you to John and the team. I know we just skimmed the surface, so if you guys want to learn more, you want a more in-depth demo, or just do a discovery session on your IT financial management strategy, please let us know. You can reach out to Jake here, myself, or Kyle, and we're glad to help you guys out. But at this point, I'll turn it back to you, John, and we'll field any questions anyone has, or we can wrap up from here.
Thanks. Yeah, great demo. It's interesting too. This is a huge topic. It's kind of like when we used to have HR back in the early days of ServiceNow, and we had IT guys trying to do HR. It's the same thing with financials, right? It's a special domain when we talk, financial person to financial person. I've been in a couple of those conversations, and it's it gets pretty daunting. So it's good to have you guys there for our people that do want to go that extra mile.
Yeah, we appreciate the time, and thanks for the engagement, everybody.
So the other part too is some of the things we're talking about. Like a lot of times those costs are determined for like project costs and rate cards. If the billing is done in ServiceNow, then we're probably not needing to get that stuff from the GLs, right? So if we're doing all the labor, there might be a portion of the labor that we have to go outside to, and then a portion of the labor that we can get from labor rate cards right in the FM tables already if they're using labor rate cards. And the same with kind of parts too, right? If there's a direct relationship of a server to a server to a service, then we can probably do some of that mapping direct, right, without having to bring the GLs in.
Absolutely, right? Yeah.
Yep. That's interesting.
And yeah, the mapping mechanisms within the product, and it's ultimately flexible, right? When we think about the data, it's a lot of information, right? And many times customers don't have all of it, and that's something that we're finding. And it's really the important piece of cost modeling is getting started, right? It's a journey, even if you're to the 9s of maturity, right? The goal of us is to be able to provide a product that can be used by anyone within that maturity curve, right? So we can use a lot of different allocation consumption metrics. If it's down to something like a ticket count, right, from ITSM, we can use that, or something as simple as a proxy or a percentage, or we're just pushing that up through those relationships. So
cool. And one of the things we're pushing really hard and we're moving towards is to product management, where we're going to have digital products. And I think that digital product manager, in a lot of the standards, they call for that person to be aware of their financials. So in a lot of cases, there would be, for different product areas, like maybe we have a product area that's just focused on IT assets. So you're responsible for determining the cost of all your IT assets, but also for the cost recovery and the chargeback as the overseer of the ITSM management program. So there might be different models under different sets of products, whether I'm selling a product to customers, or I'm selling a product internally to another area, or I'm not selling a product, I'm just providing like onboarding to all of my different departments. So it could be, a series of models depending on kind of which of those 4 buckets I put in the beginning, which of those 4 buckets we're doing. Like a couple of customers are doing for projects, they're saying, okay, you want to build a new service for your department. We have a team that'll build that for you, but we're going to bill you back all their labor that while they're working on your piece. So the time cards they take across the project tasks or the agile tasks is just charged back. So, hey, Brenda, are you on? Brenda from UC Davis was,
yep, I am here.
And that's what you guys are doing, right? You're charging back for billing out basically that factory service, right? You'll build something for somebody, but you charge them back. Is that how it works?
So yeah, different projects, even just from our, network engineers, our infrastructure team, or, so anything that we're helping anybody else on campus on from a project perspective from within our business unit, then we're doing chargebacks. And so, yes, we use the rate card. We create the expense lines. Now, currently with the way the functionality is, it'll just create the debit line. So we do the chargeback as well. So we actually have some customization that does the credit expense line in addition to the debit expense line.
Okay, nice. And someday if we can see that, that'd be awesome. And
yeah,
I know
hopefully maybe the next time. Sorry,
no
and I've
worries.
actually had network issues today, so it turned out okay.
You got to plan your COVID better, huh? I think too, there's Ed and Tyler talking to a couple of the UC teams too. So I think you guys talked to them already too, right?
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay. Good deal. Yeah. Thanks so much. I think this is a huge topic, and if there is more, more people want or something that we want to dive deep into, it seems like that labor rate area is a pretty common area that a lot of people are using. Let me know. All right, so next time what we have planned is we have a member of my team coming on, Scott Hadaway, and he's going to speak on business continuity, how you're using the models for BCM. So what do you do for business continuity management? And he's been working with a lot of customers on the architecture front to do that. Is if there's anybody who wants to speak or is working on BCM, please let me know, and we'll get you connected with Scott. And maybe you could do a little section, kind of like Casey did today. It's kind of how you're using it and how you plan to use it and expand it, but more in the BCM area. And then we'll circle back around, I think, on some of the financials here in the next few meetings as well. Does anybody have anything else? I know we have a couple new people on today, like Kathy and Joshua. Anything that you guys would want to see on here that specific to the platform? Like if it's, I know you mentioned Joshua ITOM, but specific to the platform, if there's anything you want to see on the service management area, and let us know.